Tēnā koutou katoa. Nō ku te honore te kawe i tēnei wā karakia. Me mihi ka tika ki a koe e te kawana tianara, e te kahurangi, Dame Cindy Kiro, korua tahi ko tōhua rangatira, Dr Richard Davis. Tēnā kōrua. Tēnā koutou kua tai mai nei rungi te kaupapa whakahirahira, te whakarongo ki ngā kupu kōrero a te kahurangi, Dr Jane Goodall. E te marae kura, tēnā koe. E rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. He honore, he kororia, he maunga rongo ki rungi te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Peace and calm throughout the world and goodwill to all. The karakia following is actually a waiata composed by the late Herene Melbourne. Te hau, te wai. Te hau mihi, he hau pai e. Tuku ora ki te rangi e, hei hau ora mō te ao. Hau manu, hau miri, hau kāinga, hau ora. Te wai rere he wai mata, tuku ora, he waiu, tuku ora, he wai rere, he wai mata. Tuku ora ki te whenua, hei waiu mō te ao. Wai puna, wai hanga, wai ata, wai rua. Wind, water, winds of warmth, winds of goodwill, breathing life into the surrounding air, nurturing the world. Winds of care, winds of affection. Familiar winds, winds of sustenance. The water that flows has its source in tears, giving life to the earth, nurturing the world, upwelling, fashioning, outpouring in song, outflowing in spirit. Mā te kaihanga o te ao katoa, tātou e tiaki. Mauri ora.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā iwi o te motu, e hui hui mai nei i tēnei rā. Tēnei aku mihi mahana ki o koutou, nau mai hara mai ki te hui nei, kia ora mai tātou katoa. I'd like at this time to specifically acknowledge and welcome you, Dr Jane Goodall, or just Jane, as you told me, to Wellington and here to the Grand Hall of Parliament. I understand it's been nearly 5 years since you were last here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we're truly honoured to have you come back. I know how dearly the Wellington Zoo values the relationship that you've developed with them over many years, and also how much Wellingtonians appreciated your talk last night at the Opera House. Tēnā koe, Dr Jane. I'd like also at this time to acknowledge the Honourable Tamapōtaka, Minister of Conservation, and our wonderful ministerial host today. Mr John Pearson, the Deputy British High Commissioner to New Zealand. Dr Neil Gilbert, the Jane Goodall Institute of New Zealand. Ms Natasha Beckman, Country Director, British Council New Zealand and the Pacific. Ms Nicola Toki, Chief Executive Forest and Bird. Dr Brent Clothier, past President, still exiting the Royal Society to Apārangi. Mr Phil Wood, British New Zealand Business Association. Ms Manaya Sweeney, Board Member, Tonkin and Taylor. Ms Emma Moran, Partner, DLI Piper. And to all of you, our honoured guests who are able to join us today, dear friends, familiar faces, and people who are committed to great things. Tēnā koutou katoa. Dr Jane, we can all be grateful for the months and the years that you spent at the Gombe Stream Chimpanzee Reserve, beginning right back in July of 1960. The observations you made on the behaviour of chimpanzees remain one of the most significant developments in recent scientific history, forever altering our view of ourselves and the animal species to which we are so closely related. Those observations could not have been made without an openness to the critical intersection between humans and animals, the instincts and behaviours which we share, our deep need for community and companionship, our worst tendencies towards division and even cruelty, but perhaps most importantly, our great capacity for creativity, for understanding, and for love. While you are the world's foremost figure in the field of primatology, I'm sure you won't claim that, but we do, your work has helped to hold up a mirror to our own nature as a species. Such a long and distinguished career not only reflects your steely determination, your legendary work ethic, and uncanny powers of observation, but also an abiding joy and a wonder at the world around you, as well as a generosity of spirit for so many years which has compelled you to share that joy and wonder with others. At a time when climate change and environmental degradation remain the most pressing issues facing us, you continue to devote yourself to educating, advocating, and promoting the importance of protecting our natural world. Throughout my own life and career, including my time as New Zealand's Children's Commissioner, I've come to see and understand the great power, goodness, and hope that stems from our young people. I know when they are safe and empowered and feel loved, the extent of their imagination and courage is boundless. Through both the Jane Goodall Institute and Roots and Shoots, you are not only supporting a powerful global movement of conservation and environmental care, you are also encouraging the next generation of conservationists, empowering them to make a positive difference for the future of our planet. It was the great American astrologer Carl Sagan who spoke so profoundly of the image of our pale blue dot floating in the vast emptiness of the cosmos. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with each other and to preserve and cherish this pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. I wish to finish by acknowledging all that you have done, Jane, as kaitiaki, as a guardian of our natural world, our home, and for being such a constant and profound source of inspiration and hope to so many. I wish you all the very best for your time here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I'm sure you will enjoy it, hopefully, again. I do truly wonder at your boundless energy for this work. But kia kaha, kia manawa nui, kia ora mai tātou katoa. It is now my great pleasure to invite Dr Jane Goodall and Ms. Nicola Toki to the stage, please.
Well, thank you very much for that. And indeed, wait a minute, let me sit on the stage here. So I understand I have 10 minutes to speak to you before I join you for the discussion. Is that correct? Right. So good morning to all of you. And let me start out by saying You know, all these things you hear about me, Jane does this and Jane does that and Jane inspires and blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't do it alone. I mean, none of us can really accomplish that much on our own, except a very few sages and so on. Everybody needs people to help, and I have been blessed. First of all, with an amazing mother who really supported my love of animals that I was born with. And then, and this may sound strange, but the other individual who supported me in my childhood was my dog, Rusty. And he it was who taught me that we are not so different from other animals as people thought at the time, which I didn't know about. And I mean, I had no idea when I began studying the chimps that I wasn't supposed to give them names, because I was supposed to give them numbers. I had no idea that I shouldn't talk about their personalities, which were very obvious, that I shouldn't talk about their emotions, happiness, sadness, fear, and absolutely I couldn't talk about them having an intellect that could solve problems. Those were unique to humans, that's what I was told. But it was because of the lessons taught to me by my dog that I knew that that was absolute rubbish. And so also, as I moved on, you know, when I finally got to Kenya, because my dream of going to Africa began when I was 10 and fell in love with Tarzan and thought that he married the wrong Jane. Well, he did, didn't he? Well, of course, I knew there wasn't a Tarzan, but that began my dream. I will go to Africa, live with wild animals, and write books about them. And I finally got there to Kenya first, and there I met Dr. Louis Leakey, who had faith in me and offered me the opportunity to study chimpanzees in what was then Tanganyika, in Tanzania today. And so Dr. Leakey was another who helped me on my way. And then I can't go on without acknowledging the enormous help that I had from two of the chimpanzees in particular. The first was David Greybeard, and he's the one who let me get close before the others. And he's the one I saw on a termite mound picking grass stems and using them as tools to fish for termites, breaking off leafy twigs, stripping the leaves, thus modifying a natural object and making a tool to fish for termites. And it was that got the National Geographic excited, and that allowed me to continue the research, because originally we only had money for 6 months. And then along comes my first husband, Hugo van Lauwijk, who filmed the chimpanzees. And so whereas the scientists at the beginning, because I hadn't been to college, they poo-pooed and ridiculed everything that I was observing, you know, telling me I'd done it all wrong. But it was Dr. Robert Hind, one of the top 3 ethologists in the world at the time, who helped me to write about my observations in such a way that I couldn't be torn apart by other critical scientists. So those people I want to acknowledge who helped me get through, you know, the period when I was out there learning about the chimpanzees. And I want to acknowledge the team that's here with me now. You already heard that Neil was acknowledged, but there are other people here from New Zealand. We have Lucy and Gino somewhere. Gino is somewhere in here with his family, right down here, Lucy and Gino. And then a team from JGI Australia is also here, and that's Zara. I'm not sure if Paul is here, probably, and Andy, Tasha, Scott. These people enabled me to travel around Australia, New Zealand, and deliver a message. And of course, along the way, other people are helping as well. So I just feel it's really important to emphasize that this mythical Jane out there, you know, she's just an ordinary human being who has ordinary but wonderful friendships. And I left Gombe and the chimpanzees Even though I thought I would stay there forever, I left when I realized at a conference that I helped to organize that right across Africa, chimpanzee numbers were dropping and forests were being destroyed. And although I went to that conference as a scientist planning to stay at Gombe, I left as an activist. People say that must have been a tough decision. No, it wasn't. It was just something that happened. I mean, don't know if you remember the story of St. Paul on the way to Damascus, and he left as one of the greatest persecutors of the early Christians, and he arrived as someone who championed Christianity in those days. It was like that for me. I went to the conference as one person, and I left as another. I didn't quite know what to do. I learned about the chimpanzees, got some money to go around Africa. There were 6 other chimp study sites by then. When I began, it was just me. And so I went around learning about the problems faced by chimps, destruction of forests, the hunting for bushmeat, the killing of mothers for the wildlife trade with their infants, and these things. But I also learned about the plight of the people, the crippling poverty, the lack of good health and education facilities. And it became very obvious when I flew over the tiny Gombe National Park, which had been part of a great forest belt across Africa. And when I flew over in the mid-1980s, I looked down on a little island of forest surrounded by bare hills. And it was very clear there were more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, destroying the environment in their effort to survive. And it hit me. If we can't find a way of helping these people make a living without destroying the forest, we can't save chimps, forests, or anything else. And so that began our Take Care Tokari program, improving the lives of the people, finding ways for them to live and make money. And that's now in 6 other African countries, making a huge difference. And by then I'm traveling around the world trying to raise money and learning about all the other problems that we humans have inflicted on this planet. There's a lot of talk about invasive species and how they're harming the natural environment in many countries. We are the worst invasive species that's ever lived, and we're destroying the planet just about everywhere. And so learning about this, learning about climate change, loss of biodiversity, learning about intensive farming, particularly intensive animal farming, adding to the greenhouse gases, particularly methane from the industrial animal farming, and realizing that we've done so much harm. And I was finding out in the mid-late 1980s that young people were losing hope, even back then. And it's much worse now. But even back then, some of them were angry, some of them were deeply depressed, most of them just apathetic. Well, we don't care, I mean, there's nothing we can do, we're doomed, and falling into apathy. And I realized then, if young people lose hope, we've had it. And so I began this program, Roots and Shoots, which is now in 70 countries, began in Tanzania. It's all ages from preschool through university. And it's about choosing projects to help people, projects to help animals, projects to help the environment, because it's all interrelated. And that program is now in 70 countries around the world. And it's different from other environmental programs because it includes people and it includes animal health, animal welfare. And also in that it's the choice of the young people. It's not top down. They choose the projects and then they work with enthusiasm. So Roots and Shoots is my biggest hope for the future. Along with the amazing human brain, we're beginning to work out ways of living in better harmony with the natural world. And the resilience of nature. Fly over Gombe today, the trees have come back. People respect the need to protect the environment, not just for wildlife, but their own future. And finally, the indomitable human spirit, the people who carry on, tackling what seems impossible, defying the odds, and so often succeeding. So that's the little pre-message before we have our discussion. And thank you for inviting me here. And it's a great honor to be back here. And you say maybe I'll come back again. Well, I don't know, I'm 90 already, so we'll see.
Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā koe, Jane. Ki te Dame Sydney, Dr Richard Davies, ki te menata, tēnā koutou, raurangatira mā, tēnā koutou. Ki te Dr Jane, wahine toa, tēnā koe. There is, in New Zealand, in Te Reo Māori, we like to use whakatauki, or sayings and speeches. And the one of the ones that I love is ko te taio, ko te taio ko. I am nature, and nature is me. And I don't think there is anyone on this planet who encapsulates that as beautifully as you. So thank you. I want to start by talking about one of your quotes. I've already explained to Jane out the back that I'm such a huge fan. The last time that I met her in 2017, I think I just blurted out, "I love you," and ran away. So I will try to be much more articulate.
You can't run away from here.
No, I can't, no. It's probably quite deliberate to have me trapped up here, but I'm more than happy to be trapped up here with you. And there are a number of your quotes that I love and I put in my pocket every day, mostly the ones about hope being about being stubborn and determined. And there are members here today, Minister Potaka, who know that. One of your quotes, though, is, "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." They resonate with me, and I imagine everyone else here who work in conservation in particular. And you also lead by example, carrying out your life's work with your determination, focus, and wisdom. In New Zealand, I know you're aware of the story of our black robin, a little species of bird that got down to just 5 individuals, 1 breeding female, and the Wildlife Service team at the time never gave up hope that they could turn that species around. Resonates with me. I have one with me every day. And I'd like to know, in the face of often huge adversity for our nature, for our natural world, how you keep walking that tightrope between communicating the reality of what's going on so that people understand what's at stake, and keeping hope alive.
One of my favourite stories is from New Zealand, the black robin, down eventually to 1 breeding pair, 1 male and 1 fertile female. And now there's, I think it's about 150. And that was thanks to Don Merton, who was one of the most amazing scientists. And he did it taking risks, destroying a nest when they made their first nest, taking 2 eggs, giving the eggs to another species of bird to hatch, destroying the next nest and taking 2 eggs to another unrelated species, leaving the 3rd nest, leaving blue and yellow to hatch that pair, then realizing the first pair that hatched in a tomtit nest, well, they wouldn't know how to be black robins. So he took those 2 and gave them to blue and yellow to raise with their 2, which had just hatched. And then the next 2 from the other tomtit nest, they hatched, and he took them. So these are now 6 in the nest. And he said, Blue looked up at me as if to say, "What the hell next?" And he said, "It's all right, darling. We'll help you feed them." So he and 2 other naturalists were running around the island, the offshore island, catching insects and helping blue and yellow. So, there are so many stories. That's particularly extreme, but there's so many stories. And this whole area is like all the forest around Gombe coming back. It's an amazing story. The wildlife corridors that are growing in different parts of the world, enabling species that have been fragmented to link up again. And I don't know, there's so much hope out there.
I think you're right. And the power of storytelling, because I've been listening to some of your books lately, and you talked about not using stats. I think you said at one point, we'll put the stats in the back of the book.
Yes, that was the Book of Hope.
That's right.
Yes, the man who's supposed to be my co-author. When I saw the first chapter, I said, what on earth is this? Statistics about the study of hope in the laboratory. Is that what you want to hear about? I mean...
and I think it plays to one of your many themes about the power of humankind, and the ability for us to turn all this around, and coming from language. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, because, the chimpanzees are so like us in so many ways. And when I come to think of, what's the difference, I think the main difference is the explosive development of our intellect. And I believe that was probably, at least in part, started because we developed at some point in our evolution spoken words. And once you get spoken words, chimp infants learn by watching and imitating. Our children do as well. But we can teach our children about things that are not there. We can get together and have discussions about things. And this, I think, gives us this big advantage. We haven't always used it wisely, have we?
No, but I think the thing that I love about the stories that you tell is, we're Homo sapiens, we're supposed to be the wise ape. We're perhaps not always using our wisdom.
Wise apes don't destroy their only home, which is what we are doing.
Yesterday, our Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment talked about the need for us to mobilise as communities, as society, and we can't do that when we're polarised. So how do we cross these kind of ideological divides? Is nature the key?
I think time in nature is really not only beneficial but desperately important, particularly for children. It's actually been proved that time in nature is beneficial for the very young child in a proper psychological development. And so many young children today have no opportunity of going into nature. So many humans are in the inner city. And so we have to work really hard to bring nature into the inner city. Is beginning to happen, greening the city, which is incredibly important. But our society is so fractured. And, the gap between haves and have-nots grows wider and wider. And so much is going on that, think of Ukraine, think of Gaza, 15 wars, conflicts across Africa. And what are we going to do about it? We can't just think giving children nature is going to cure everything. We've got to take action. We've got to get together. We've got to bring, and I believe here you have business and conservation and government. We must get together to solve some of these problems together and around the world. But it's not easy when you think of what's going on in some countries. And so people tend to give up, and then they stop thinking about it. And that doesn't help either. So we are in very, very tough times. And that's why, age 90, I'm traveling around the world, and particularly talking to young people. I've talked to schools in Australia and here in New Zealand, and the energy, commitment, and dedication of children, once they understand the problems and we empower them to take action, it's incredibly uplifting. I think it's what keeps me going. And they are the politicians and business people of the future.
They are, and we actually have some very committed youth in the audience. in Forest and Bird we have a youth arm, and we've got Roots and Shoots, and as you say, 70 countries. I'm constantly trying to convince the youth in Forest and Bird that I am at least youth adjacent, but they don't allow that. They're going to have some great questions for you later, I imagine. I know that they feel the pressure, though, of being expected to take on the responsibility for solving the mess we've left them in. What is the, you talk often about the fact that every single person has a role to play. Like, every person can do something. And my personal favourite part is that hope isn't just wishing, it's leaning into it and, doing something about it. It's having a vision and then stubbornly going after it. What can people in this room, in this country, on this planet, do to support the young people who are inheriting this shambles that we've left them?
Well, of course they need support, and it makes me really angry when children are told it's their responsibility. It's not, it's ours. It's our responsibility, and we need to help them. But also we need to empower them to take action, and we need to encourage them to choose the kind of action they want to take, because it's different for different children, and it's different at different ages. And that's why Roots and Shoots is really so different, because it's so flexible. So the projects chosen to be done here in Wellington will be probably very different from projects chosen by children in other parts of New Zealand and other parts of the world. So helping the young people, helping them to find the courage and the confidence to move ahead and work on their projects. And then the other advantage is we're growing a Roots and Shoots family around the world, 70 countries. Everywhere a Roots and Shoots youth goes, in those 70 countries, they find family. And also, because we began in 91, we've got the alumni, and they're already in positions of power. There's some in business, there's some in politics, there's a lot in nature conservation, a lot in education.
So give them a voice and give them a chance to have that voice.
Yeah, but help them.
Yeah.
We need to help them.
I, like yourself, have long believed in the power of storytelling. In fact, I reckon my next lot of business cards, I'm just going to write storyteller underneath it. And creativity in the arts to inspire passion in people for a different way, and to complement with science and research. You've done a lot of this. Can you tell us about perhaps, some of your favourite projects that reflect our ability and passion as humans for the arts and the curiosity that we have to understand the science of our natural world?
Well, I don't know about an example. It's just that, going around the world, I find so much creativity. And I think that science used to be, when I first went to Cambridge University, I was bound by the National Geographic that was supporting me to write a book. So I wrote a book, and I was quite excited when it came out. It was called, I think, My Friends, the Wild Chimpanzees. I was very nearly sent down from Cambridge because scientists did not write popular books. And if you care about conservation, if you care about the world, if you care about people, you've got to share what you've learned. And this is what I think is so really, really important, that we should reach out and share. And how can you inspire other people to conserve the world if you spend a lot of time and you study something and you have a great success, but it only goes out in musty old scientific journals? What's the use of it today?
I couldn't agree more, and I want to give the opportunity for some of the young people in the audience, and the young at heart, to be able to ask some questions. The first question is from a young lady called Eden, who is a very big fan of yours, and possibly our youngest member here today. So Eden, the floor is yours.
Hello Jane and Nicola. My name is Eden. My question is, what can children do for the environment to really make a difference and create change?
What can you do?
No, what can us children do?
Well, yes, you students, right.
Yeah.
What can you do? Well, first of all, we'd love to welcome you into Roots and Shoots. And Lucy is here. Stand up, Lucy, so she can see you. Because when you get into Roots and Shoots, you sit around with your friends and you talk about what you care about. Some of you may care about trash. You don't like to see trash in the streets. Some of you may care about the way animals are treated. Some of you may care about, I don't know, in some countries, children care about the treatment of the homeless, that sort of thing. So then you discuss with your friends, well, what could we do? And you come up with ideas. And then you roll up your sleeves and you get out there and you take action. And then you inspire others when you do that. You will particularly have an impact on your parents. And I know many, many parents who say, well, of course I recycle, my kids make me. And I know other parents who say, well, I used to just go into a shop and buy what I needed, but now I have to say, how was it made? Did it harm the environment? Is it cheap because it was cruel to animals, like factory farmed meat, for example? Is it cheap because of unfair wages that are paid to people along the supply chain and so on? So you see, you young people have a huge influence on your parents. It's probably a parent beside you holding her camera high in the air. So thank you for that question, because we're counting on you, but we want to help you. You're not alone. You absolutely are not alone. And we hope that businesses and companies and politicians will also help you to do what you need to do for the future of your children, my great-grandchildren. Thank you for that question.
Hi, Jane. I had a question about science communication. So in the future, I hope to be a scientist, and I was wondering your thoughts on the challenges of scientists communicating with the public and tips on overcoming this.
Well, the best way to engage the public in the amazing things that you're doing or planning to do is storytelling. It's storytelling that reaches people's hearts. And you know, if I have to talk to a politician about some issue like something to do with factory farming or the cost of something or whatever it happens to be, it's absolutely no use my arguing with them and battling against the intellect because I'm just a woman, why should they listen to me, sort of thing. But you've got to sum up that person, even just a little bit. Is there anything that you share? Maybe you both love dogs, something like that. And then well, for me, I've got 90 years worth of stories, so I think back and pick out the right story and try to change that way. And I'll tell you one story, because there's a lot of business people here, I think. And I was talking to a whole lot of CEOs in Singapore. And afterwards, one of them, he actually called me up and he said, Jane, I just want to assure you for the last 10 years, I've really been fighting to get my company as ethical as can be in the country where we source our products. This was an international company. Along the supply chain as much as possible is difficult. In our offices around the world, and also in the way we treat our customers. And he said there were 3 reasons. First, saw the writing on the wall and realized that we're running out of natural resources in some places faster than nature can replenish them, if they're replenishable. Secondly, consumer pressure. People are beginning to ask those questions that I said, and so business is having to change if they want to keep going. But he said what tipped the balance for me was my little girl. She was 10 years old. She came back from school one day and she said, Daddy, they're telling me that what you're doing is hurting the planet. That's not true, is it, Daddy? Because it's my planet.
Very powerful.
With how when you first did this study, you had no formal education in that area, is that something that you think would still be possible today? And do you believe that there's a correct balance between necessarily formal education and just passion in that area?
Well, I'm not sure I can really answer that. I mean, in some cases, it's probably possible to go into science having not had prior education like I did. But the world has changed a lot since then, and there are far fewer kind of gaping holes where we don't know anything unless you go deep, deep down under the sea, and probably you need a lot of education for that. Or you're one of these people who's up in the stars, but I wouldn't go there with Elon Musk if I were you. So, you know, there's always a way. If you're passionate about doing something, you'll somehow find a way. People are volunteering. It really can't be answered unless there's one specific thing that you're thinking about. But there's always a way to make a difference. Every single one of us makes an impact on the planet every single day, and we get to choose what sort of impact we make. And then acting together, that changes the world.
I can't think of a more beautiful way to finish such a beautiful conversation. And just before I invite, there is lovely John, oh there he is. Just before I invite John up, and because I'm being cheeky and I can, you inspired me. And you inspired me to be a storyteller too. So here are a couple of my little stories about nature in New Zealand, just to say thank you for your time. Thank you for ensuring I couldn't escape and I got to have this wonderful conversation. And on behalf of us all, just thank you for the inspiration that you give us every day.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I'm John Pearson. I'm the Deputy High Commissioner at the British High Commission. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody when I say just what a fascinating talk that was and an exchange afterwards. I mean, lots of really deep points there, but there are three things that I particularly liked. Jane, the way that you made that point linking conservation and development, because I think for a long time people did see conservation and human development as two separate issues, but we now realise that you have to support the population in a certain area if you also want to protect biodiversity there. Secondly, thank you for talking about young people, because it is very important, as you've said, to build that consensus amongst the population, and of course young people are our future. I personally think that's come a long way in the last couple of decades, that young people these days really are very engaged with the issue of the environment. And communication, you brought out for all of us how you can have the best story in the world somewhere written down, but if you can't share that with other people, then it doesn't have the same impact. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. I particularly enjoyed the talk this morning for two reasons, one of which I'm a diplomat, but my background is in sustainability, and I've worked on the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, on climate change in Southeast Asia, which was really interesting for me. And secondly, because as I mentioned earlier, we have met before. I was working in Singapore in 2010, and you came to the High Commissioner's residence for dinner. And when he invited you to speak, you spoke to us for about a minute in chimpanzee. Now, as a diplomat, you do lots of different engagements, but I think I can safely say that dinner party stuck in my mind for a long time because I'd never heard it before, but it was wonderful. So Jane, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Can I say a few other thank yous for people here today? Firstly, the Honourable Tama Potaka, our host. It's fantastic you let us use these premises. To the Governor-General and Richard Davis for joining us for this wonderful event. A big thank you to Paul Atkins, CEO of the Royal Society, and your wonderful team for helping to organise the event. You always do a great job. Thank you, Natasha Beckman, and the team at the British Council for supporting this. The British Council has a big ongoing commitment to environmental work. They do a lot of activities with us in the High Commission, and they have something called Trouble in Paradise, which looks at climate change in the Pacific, which has been around New Zealand. Hopefully some of you have seen that. Thank you to Forest and Bird, Nicola. We first met 2 days ago, and we've done a lot since then. So thank you for chairing that so well. A big thanks to the British New Zealand Business Association. Phil Wood, I know that you've worked very hard on this initiative, thank you. And to the other sponsors, DLA Piper and Tonkin and Taylor, for your support today. I'm sure that what we've heard will stay with all of us for a long time. And to wrap up, I'd just like to say it's really not easy working on sustainability. Jane, you spoke about that. It is a hard slog at times, and it can be very lonely. And I think those of us who really care about the future of the planet have to stick together, support each other, and we all need role models. Now, as a British diplomat, I represent my country, and there are lots of things I'm proud about in the UK. Some other things, maybe not so much, but lots of things I am proud about. And Jane, I think you are probably one of the best role models that we have in the UK, and it really makes me proud to see the incredible impact that you have on so many people around the world. So thank you for doing this for us today. Right, we're nearly at the end of formal proceedings. There's just one more thing that's going to happen. But when we do finish the formal proceedings, can I please invite you all to enjoy the refreshments that we've got today. We've got some food and some drink. I hope you'll stay and chat to all the people who are here. And finally, thank you to you all for coming today. And Jane, thank you again.
Kia ora no tātou. A very simple karakia, which I'll ask you to sing, because I think you can't have such a beautiful kaupapa, beautiful speaker, and not waiata. So this is very simple. We talk about te aroha, te whakapono, me te tūmanako. Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. But I think, listening today, we have to have reasons for hope, because without hope, we can be lost. So, our waiata, e tū. Te aroha.
Tū tawa mai ki runga, tū tawa mai ki raro. Tū tawa mai ki roto, tū tawa mai ki waho. Kia tū te mauri tū, te mauri ora. Ki te kato, haumia, huia, taeki. Taeki e te whānau, he haka nui te mihi ki tō tātou rangatira, mai rai kura e tau I wainganui I a tātou. I roto I tēnā, mihi atu, mihi atu. On behalf of my iwi te Aotearoa Taranaki whānui, sorry I was late, but I saw my other cousin here. One wish. Can we get a photo of you with my iwi tribal members here and the youth? And all the youth and those young people that asked the question, koe rā te mea nui. Ko tātou ngā rangatira mo Apopo. They are our champions and our leaders of tomorrow. Nō reira, kia tau te rangi Māori, ki runga, ki raro, ki waho, ki roto. Riri, riri, hau, pai mārere. Kia ora tātou.
It's been wonderful to be here today with Dr Jane Goodall in New Zealand Parliament. At British Council, we work with other countries to try and address the global challenges of our time. We've been delighted to work with Dr Goodall. She is such an inspirational figure of hope, and she talks about the indomitable human spirit.
It's really inspiring to be with someone who just emanates what it is to be human, and that's to be kind.
I'm coming to the end of this visit to New Zealand. This time it's only been Auckland and here in Wellington, where I am now with Mr. H. And it's been, again, like last time, an amazing experience. I've learned a lot. I've met wonderful people. I've been here with my team. And hopefully now Roots and Shoots will continue to grow and spread further and further across New Zealand. And the Jane Goodall Institute is already picking up and hopefully will be strong and vibrant soon. So to all my friends in New Zealand, I say thank you and good au revoir and see you again soon.